So, what should I do if nothing really interests me enough to build a career around it? Or the version that comes a few years later. I've picked something, I've been doing it for a while, but it still doesn't feel right. Both of these are real and common, but both of these get almost no real attention in the career advice conversation because the career advice conversation is built around one premise that doesn't hold for a lot of people. And that premise is that you already have a passion. Maybe it's hidden, maybe you haven't found it yet, maybe you need to dig a little deeper, but somewhere inside of you, there is a specific calling, a thing you were meant to do. The normal advice is to follow that passion, do what you love, find your purpose, turn your gift into a career. But this framework is not only unhelpful for a significant portion of people, it's actively harmful because it creates a specific kind of shame around not having a clearly articulated passion. If you don't know what you love, if nothing feels like an obvious calling, then by the logic of this framework, something is wrong with you. You're the broken one. Everyone else has their thing, and you just haven't found yours yet. But here's what I actually believe. I think most people don't have a passion waiting to be discovered. Most people develop interests through engagement. They become interested in things by doing them, not before. And the follow your passion framework has it exactly backwards. It tells you to find the passion first and then build the career second, when actually the career often comes first and then the passion, if it comes at all, comes through doing it. Now, this doesn't mean accepting a life of work you hate. It just means approaching this career question with a different framework, one that doesn't require you to have discovered your life's purpose before you've had enough life to know what that might be. So that's what this video is, a different framework, one that actually works for people who don't know what they want, who feel like nothing really calls to them, or who have tried the follow your passion approach and found themselves disappointed, confused, or stuck. I think the follow your passion advice is bad advice for most people because it assumes several things that aren't true for most people. First, it assumes that passion precedes action. For most people, interests develop through engagement, not before it. You become passionate about something by getting good at it, by going deeper into it and having experiences within it. So waiting to feel the passion before committing to a direction is like waiting for something that can't show up until you've already started. The second part is that it assumes passion is stable. Even in people who have strong interests, those interests change. The thing that felt compelling at 18 doesn't always feel compelling at 25. Passions evolve. They deepen in some directions and fade in others. The third thing is that it assumes your passion can translate into a viable career. Because even if you have genuine passion for something, that doesn't mean you can make a career out of it. Plenty of people have interests where they can't make any money from it. And some of the things most people are passionate about are better kept as passions, preserved and protected from the pressures of trying to monetize it. And the fourth thing is that it assumes the alternative to passion is misery. The follow your passion framework implies that if you don't have passion for your work, then you're doomed for this life of misery. But this is a false binary. There is an enormous space between passionate calling and soul-crushing misery. Most careers live in that space, in the work that's engaging and meaningful and well-suited to you, even if it doesn't feel like a divine calling. So the career question is not, what am I passionate about? But instead, it's a series of different questions. And answering those questions honestly, rather than trying to force an answer to the passion question you don't have, is where the actual direction comes from. And these questions are not personality quiz questions. They're not, what are your strengths in some vague way. They are specific, honest questions that are worth sitting with carefully. The first question is, what problems do you find yourself thinking about without being asked to? Not what problems are you supposed to care about, not what problems seem important or worthy or impressive to care about. What problems do you actually think about when nothing is directing your thinking? What inefficiencies bother you? What situations make you want to fix something? What do you read about or pay attention to when you have the complete freedom to pay attention to anything? This is different from passion. You're not looking for something that makes you feel alive in a dramatic way. You're looking for problems that pull your attention without being required to. The second question is, what kind of thinking do you find least exhausting? Not what are you good at, but what kind of thinking feels relatively natural to you even when it's challenging? Some people find analytical problems engaging even when they're hard. Others find interpersonal navigation energizing even when it's complex. Others find creative generation exciting even when it's demanding. What kind of cognitive work can you do for an extended period of time without the particular exhaustion that comes from doing something genuinely misaligned with how your mind works? The third question to figure out is, what would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail and that nobody would judge your choice? This question is useful by surfacing what you want without the fear filter. A lot of career confusion is not actually about not knowing what you want. It's about knowing what you want, but having reasons it seems unrealistic or risky or embarrassing to pursue. The fear filter edits out options before they're fully considered. This question temporarily removes that filter. And you don't have to pursue what surfaces, but it's worth knowing what it is for you. The difference between I have genuinely no idea what I want and I know what I want but it feels too risky is significant. Those are two different problems with two different solutions. The fourth question to figure out is, what do most people consistently come to you for? Not what you've studied or what your resume says, but what do the people in your actual life actually seek you out for? The friend who comes to you when they need to think through a difficult decision. The colleague who asks you specifically to look at their work. The family member who calls you when something goes wrong. What are the things that people seem to know you can do better than others? This is often a more honest indicator of natural strength and inclination than anything self-reported, because the people around you probably go to you for a specific reason, and that reason is because you're good at that thing. And the pattern in who comes to you for what problem is real data. And the fifth and final question to figure out is, what are you willing to be bad at for a significant period of time? This is the practical filter that actually determines what's sustainable. The beginning of any path is uncomfortable, slow, full of incompetence that's visible to yourself and others. So what are you willing to endure that specific kind of discomfort for? Not what sounds exciting from the outside, but what are you willing to be genuinely bad at publicly for the time it takes to get good? Now, here's a practical exercise that I think is more useful than career assessment questions. For the next week, I want you to pay attention to what you voluntarily pay attention to. The YouTube rabbit holes you genuinely go down. The subreddits you actually read. The books you actually finish. The conversations that make you lose track of time. The topics you find yourself looking up after someone mentions them. The problems in your life or the lives of people around you that you find yourself wanting to solve even when no one asked you to. And make a list, a real one. Include things that seem embarrassing or impractical or small. Include the weird niche interests that you've never told anyone about because it seems like a hobby, not a career. Include the thing that makes you slightly defensive when people don't take it seriously because somewhere you sense it matters more than it seems. The embarrassing version of this list is usually the most honest and the most useful. The one that's edited for what sounds good is usually less helpful because it's been filtered through the what's a reasonable answer mechanism before it gets to the page. And then once you've compiled this list, I want you to find the patterns. Are there themes across apparently different interests? The pattern is more important than the individual item, because the individual item may not be a career, but the pattern might contain one. For example, if someone is interested in true crime podcasts, psychology articles, and courtroom dramas, and conversations about why people do what they do, shows a pattern of interest in motivation and behavior. And that pattern can form in a direction of law, psychology, research, consulting, writing, journalism, or policy. The True Crime Podcast isn't a career, but the underlying interest it represents might point toward one. Another example is someone who's interested in optimization, efficiency, and the satisfaction of systems working correctly has a pattern that may point towards engineering, operations, project management, system designs, and data analysis. So the hobbies you invest your time in may not be the direct career, but will point you in a direction of a career. And a career fit is not based on just interest or skill, but the intersection of three things: what you're genuinely interested or curious about, what you're actually good at or could realistically get good at, and what the market pays for in some form. The interest without the skill is a hobby, and the skill without the interest is a miserable competence. And the interest and the skill without the market value is a difficult financial reality. So the intersection of these three things is where a sustainable career fit actually is. Most career confusion is a result of trying to find the perfect answer in one of these three categories without examining the other two. Trying to find the passion without asking yourself if you have the relevant skills or whether the market supports it. Or discovering you're good at something without asking yourself whether you're interested in doing it for 40 hours a week for the next 30 years. Or pursuing market value without checking whether the intersection with skills and your interest is actually there. So the practical exercise is to map out each category honestly. For your skills, what do you actually do well enough that other people noticed and comment on? What tasks come more naturally to you than they seem to come to others? What have you gotten consistently better at over time? What are the things you've been trained in formally or informally that represent real competence? For your interests, find the list that we talked about before, the honest version. What pulls your attention? What problems do you find yourself thinking about? What kinds of engagement feel relatively natural even when they're demanding? And lastly, the market value. What does the world actually pay for that connects to your interest and skills? And this requires research rather than assumption. A lot of people rule out directions based on an uninformed assumption that there's no money in them. A lot of other people pursue directions based on an uninformed assumption that there's a lot of money in them. You need to find what the actual landscape of what's paid for and how much is it worth understanding before you make decisions based on it. Where these three intersect is worth pursuing. And it won't be perfect and it won't feel like a calling necessarily, but instead it's somewhere where your actual strengths are, your genuine interests are present at some level, and the financial reality is viable. And with that, it's at least a good starting point. Now, here's the shift in how to approach this that I think makes the biggest practical difference. Stop trying to answer the question before you have any data. The reason career decisions feel so impossibly high stakes is that we've framed them as permanent, as the thing you'll be for the rest of your life. And when a decision feels that permanent, there is all this pressure to get it right. But you need more information before you can decide. You can't know if it's the right thing before you commit, because the knowing comes from doing, not before it. The only way to know if a direction actually fits is to try it in some form and see what happens. You need to shift into this experimental mindset that says, I don't need to find the permanent answer. I need to get more information about whether this direction is worth investing more into. I'm not deciding what to do with my entire life. I'm just running this short-term test to see if it's worth investing more time into it. And this experiment can take on a lot of different forms depending on where you are. It can be an informational interview with someone working in a field you're curious about, not to validate a decision you've already made, but to gather honest information about what the work actually involves day to day. The gap between how a career looks from the outside and what it's actually like to do it is usually significant. Information from someone inside the field is more valuable than anything you can research from the outside. Or for a freelance or side project in a direction you're considering, actually doing the work, even at a small scale, even for free initially, tells you more about whether you want to do more of it than any amount of thinking about it does. Or a relevant course, workshop, or skill building experiment, not as a substitute for actual work experience, but as a way of testing whether deeper engagement within an interest increases or decreases when you're in it. Real engagement often reveals whether an interest is deep enough to sustain a career or whether it's better preserved as a casual interest. And even a conversation with someone who's left the field you're considering going into. The person who left a career path is often more informative than the person who stayed because they can tell you what they didn't anticipate, what the work actually required, and why it stopped being the right fit. So, this experiment mindset takes the pressure off the decision. You're not committing to a career, you're just testing different careers. And now I want to address the good enough for now career advice. For a lot of young people who don't know what they want to do yet, the most useful career choice is not the perfect one. It's just the one that's good enough for now until you figure out what it is. And this is not settling, it's being strategic. Settling is choosing something you know is wrong because you've given up on finding something better. By choosing something that's viable and not wrong, that develops real skills, that still maintains your options, and doesn't close off any directions in the future that you may want to pursue, is being strategic. This "it's good enough for now" advice has a few specific properties that will help in the future. It builds transferable skills, skills that are valuable in multiple contexts: communication, analysis, project management, writing, sales, problem solving. These are skills that you'll be able to take somewhere else. It keeps your options open. It doesn't over specialize you so early that you're locked into a direction before you know enough to choose it deliberately. And it doesn't destroy you. It's not so misaligned with who you are and how you work that it erodes your confidence or your energy or your sense of self. You can do it without hating yourself. And it pays well enough that you're not spending all of your resources managing financial stress. A job that has these properties and that you're not passionate about is actually a perfectly reasonable place to be in as a young adult. The shame around "I don't know what I want to do yet" is real and not helpful. A lot of people don't know what they want to do until they've done a lot of jobs and learned from those past jobs. There's people who think they know what they want to do in school, and then when they actually get the job, realize it wasn't for them. So there's no shame in doing the good enough for now career. There's strategy in it. The ones who've experimented their ways through their 20s often arrive somewhere more genuinely theirs. And the last thing I want to address is the confusion I see about meaning, about the broader question of whether what you're spending your time on has significance, whether your work connects to something that matters beyond your exchange of labor for compensation. And I think the meaning in work is not found, but built. It's constructed between the connections you make, between what you do and why it matters, between the work and the people it helps, between the career and the values that inform it. Most work isn't inherently meaningful in an obvious way. The meaning comes from how you approach it, what you build through it, who you become while doing it, and how you connect it to things outside of itself. This means that the question, "Is this work meaningful?" is not the right question to ask before you start. It's the question you answer over time through how you engage with the work, through whether you bring genuine attention to it, through whether you let it connect you to other people and other things that matter to you. Now, some work makes this easier than others. Work that directly helps people, work that creates something, and work that solves problems with visible consequences. These have a more meaningful generating capacity than work that feels purely transactional or administrative. But even in jobs that seem less naturally meaningful, meaning can always be constructed. The accountant who sees their work as the infrastructure that allows the business to do the thing it actually does, or the administrator who sees themselves as the person who makes everything possible for the people around them, or the technical person who sees their work as the unseen foundation of something that matters. The meaning isn't always automatic, but it's available in almost any field for almost any role if you're willing to look for it actively rather than waiting for it to be obvious. But this doesn't mean you should take any job and convince yourself it's meaningful. It means that if the work is in a reasonable direction, if it connects to something real, develops genuine skills, and doesn't violate your values, then the meaning can be built over time. It doesn't have to be present from day one. Now, here's how I want to close off this video. You don't need a passion. You don't need a calling. You don't need to figure out your life's purpose before taking the next step. Now, these are real things for some people, and that's good for them, but they're not prerequisites to building a good career, and they're not accessible to most people on demand. What you need is a direction that's honest, and the career that fits you is not waiting to be discovered like a treasure that's been there all along. It's built through engaging, experimenting, and the accumulation of information that comes from trying things. So, if you don't know what you want to do with your life yet, all that means is that you're still in the early process of finding out.